Welcome to The Productivity Show, a podcast where we believe you can get the important things done without sacrificing your health, your family, and things that matter to you. My name is Brooks Duncan from Asian Efficiency, where we help people become more productive at work and in life. And today is another Wisdom Wednesday episode, where you'll get actionable productivity advice in less than 10 minutes. And the topic today is a specific part of quarterly planning, and that is called minding the gap. It's one of the skills we teach in our 25X Productivity System course. And if you think about it, what is the first thing that everybody says about planning? It's things like make smart goals and write them down, that type of thing. And yeah, stuff like that is super, super important, but making goals just really isn't enough. You actually have to do them, of course. And if your goals are ambitious, this is much easier said than done because it can be overwhelming to figure out what you need to do to achieve them. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. We call it minding the gap, and the gap being the place between where you are now and where you want to go. It's kind of like that meme you may have seen about how to draw an owl. Step one is to draw two circles, and step two is this gorgeously drawn owl. What came between those two, right? And that's the thing with goals. And quarterly planning, honestly, is the perfect place for this exercise because 90 days is long enough where the gap might not be initially obvious, but it's short enough that you can fill in the gap with some confidence. As an example, on a bit of an impulse last week, my wife and I decided to go to Nicaragua for our family's spring break. And by impulse, I mean we decided, and 15 minutes later, I had the flights booked. And then, of course, the overwhelm started, right? I know the goal to go to Nicaragua for spring break, but there's a gap between where I am now, which is Vancouver in February, recording this in my basement, and my son's taking surfing lessons in spring break. There's a lot that has to happen in between those two. And that's where we get to minding the gap. So here is how to do that. Step one is where you are now. And honestly, this can be not the most fun part of the process, right? But really, it's one of the most important. It's so critical to have a clear view of where you are now. Too often we focus too much on the end goal, right? Like visualization, manifestation, and stuff like that. You need to know where your starting point is so that you can make a realistic plan. Like, let's say that your goal is to have a Salesforce certification this quarter. Great. So here's some of the things to think about. What do you know now? Do you even have a Trailhead login? Have you used Salesforce in your job or at least a similar CRM? Or maybe your goal is to hike the Annapurna circuit in Nepal, something I'm kind of obsessed with at the moment. What's your fitness level? How are your finances? How about your time flexibility? You can see how knowing the start point is just so important. And it's not to be a downer. If your start point presents roadblocks or challenges, they may be able to be overcome, but you need to know about them. So that's step one, where you are now. Step two is where you want to go. And that's the fun part, right? This is where we get to dream. Chances are you already have a goal of some sort, so now you're adding a little bit of clarity to it. So you want a Salesforce certification. Which one? How and where will you complete it? Maybe your Annapurna circuit. When is the best time of year to do it? Who will you do it with, if anyone? Guided or not guided? What's your definition of done that means you've accomplished your goal? You want to give some clarity and flesh out that goal a little bit. Then we get to step three, which is identifying the gap. You know your start point, you know your end point. What is involved from going from A to B? That's the gap. I actually like how Charlie Gilkey describes it in his book, Start Finishing. He calls it the air sandwich. The bottom piece of bread is your current reality, and the top piece is your vision, your mission, and your goals. And in between that is the gap. So for Salesforce, that's probably figuring out what Trailhead courses you want to do, maybe some practice exams. For Annapurna, it's figuring out your finances, time off, researching altitude, maybe doing some physical training. Your gap will be different, of course, but everybody has one between where we are now and where we want to get to. And the more you can define that, the more likely it is you'll succeed at step number 4, which is, of course, to create your action plan. You know where you are, you know where you want to go, and now you know what's involved in getting there. So it's about figuring out those specific concrete actions and when you'll do them, and working that into your quarterly, your monthly, your weekly, and then, of course, your daily plans. So here's how to get started with minding the gap. Pick a goal that you have right now and figure out your start point, your end point, do your gap analysis, and then create your action plan. Get started as quickly as possible now while you still have momentum. Thanks so much for listening to The Productivity Show, and I will see you next time.